Well, hello, teacher friends. Christina Whitlock here, your host of Beyond Measure and your self-appointed anytime piano teacher friend. Today, we continue the Summertime Conversation series by examining one of the hottest topics in our field today, working with neurodiverse students. I can vividly recall going to conference sessions on neurodiversity when I was in grad school. At the time, it felt like this super niche area of teaching that only a few people were focused on. Fast forward 20 years, and we are all faced with teaching students whose brains operate differently than ours. Personally, I love the way this ever-changing landscape challenges us to focus on teaching the human in front of us instead of the materials that we're using. You've probably heard me talk a lot about that on the show before, but today I've called in reinforcements. Dr. Elizabeth Davis-Everhart is joining me today for a conversation that applies to every studio teacher, whether you specifically teach differently abled students or not. Elizabeth runs a studio for neurodiverse students, and she's built quite an internet presence helping teachers learn more about music teaching and the brain. You can find her on social media at Creative Piano Pedagogy, as well as her new podcast of the same name. You can find out more about Elizabeth's work in today's show notes, but for now, let's just get to it. Here is my conversation with Dr. Elizabeth Davis-Everhart. Hey, Elizabeth Davis-Everhart is here for us today at Beyond Measure, and we are here to talk all kinds of things about neurodivergent students. And Elizabeth, I just want to welcome you today.
Oh, thank you. It is such a joy to be with you, and I am so excited.
We're going to have a good time here. So you have made it into my list of like the top 2 people I refer teachers to on the subject of neurodiversity. So there's Dr. Scott Price, and then there's Dr. Elizabeth Davis-Everhart. And so congrats on cracking my top 2. You have just been so forthcoming and willing to help teachers spread the word of these important matters of our teaching. And of course, we all recognize that this is a need that is in our community more and more and more as our awareness grows around the different ways that people process or think and approach music study and life. And anyway, I just want to thank you because it's a lot of effort to put yourself out there and communicate these ideas online and offer services for teachers and things. So thanks for all that you're doing.
You. It's truly an honor to be listed with Scott Price in that list because he is truly my everlasting mentor. But it is really hard to give advice on this topic because no 2 students are alike, and I never want to miss something. It's so hard. It's like diagnosing something without seeing the person. It's such important work, and it's such fun, joy-filled work.
I think you and I probably have this in common, that the real draw to piano teaching is the people. And like, I love the human puzzle and figuring out how I can get the most out of their musical experience. And so I think for you, your education has centered around how the brain works and how individual students respond to certain kinds of activities and those kinds of things. And so I just feel a kindred spirit with you in that regard because it really is about the people.
Yes, it is. It's so easy to get caught up on all of the other extra things that we focus on, but really we're just teaching humans, and we're also human. So that aspect of humanity is always present, and that's kind of a beautiful constant, really.
It really is. You and I were kind of chatting before we started recording, and we were saying how the more information that comes out in the world, the more we all start thinking, maybe I'm a little neurodiverse. That might be kind of the great awakening in this area is that there's just been this assumption that the human brain works a certain way and the world has been devised for the human brain to work a certain way for so long. And like, thank goodness we're waking up and realizing that, hey, some of us are built differently and that's okay.
It's like most of the world in our education system, our music, even just our performance icons and who we looked up to, everything is built around this ideal. Like this
Mhm.
is built for the ideal student. This is built for the ideal performer, the ideal. And that is so unrealistic and unattainable for
Mhm.
99% of teachers and students that it makes so many feel like they have failed or they're not doing something correctly because their students don't fit in that very small margin of what we're looking to as, oh, this is what you should be doing.
Mhm. Well, and even ourselves as performers, like my head is going to fall off because I'm nodding along so hard with you right now. Because there is something, and I say this a lot about my musician friends, that unattainable standard is kind of what compels us in this work. But it also makes us feel really badly about ourselves a lot of the time. And I'm not sure what that says about us, that we have committed ourselves to this life and to this art that we're never quite going to live up to in our minds. I I don't
I
know.
think I kind of refer to it as the wonderful torture that is
Yeah.
being a musician because
Hmm.
we love it so much. And
Hmm.
that's why it's such hard work, inner
Yeah.
hard work. It's very difficult internal work,
Hmm.
just to come to peace with the things that we share with the world. It's really difficult because we love it. If we didn't care
Absolutely.
so much, it wouldn't matter.
And there it is. That is the crux of the whole matter, isn't it? And I think because we love it so much, people like you and I just want to share it with the world. And we so desperately want our students to experience music the way we do. And that's why your work is so important because it's going to allow us to make that impact on students even more. I'm really curious. I have all kinds of specific questions for you, but I'm wondering if we can zoom out a little bit and like, could you build me maybe a top three list of mistakes that piano teachers make in our work with neurodiverse students?
Oy vey, that's a great
It's
question.
a tall order, I know.
Tall order. The top of my list is probably the fact that teachers limit their students
Hmm.
because they stick with what they feel comfortable teaching.
Hmm.
We place a lot of unnecessary limitations on our students because what we're used to doing doesn't work for this particular child.
Hmm.
Or, oh my gosh, they're not learning Bach the way you're supposed to learn Bach. Um, and whatever, it doesn't fit. Again, back to that ideal, because it's not matching up with what we perceive to be the ideal circumstances or learning pace or whatever. It's not comfortable for us. Growth is very uncomfortable for anyone.
Hmm.
For musicians, it's particularly uncomfortable, and ironically so, because as musicians, we're doing something that's a living organism, that's music. So we should be thinking always in this growth mindset, but it's incredibly difficult when what we've been doing and what we have dedicated our lives to, this art of teaching, isn't working anymore. So I think we sort of get stuck on what's not working and we just limit our students. Well, they clearly can't play standard repertoire. They can't have good technique. And we just get stuck in all of these things that are not working. So
Hmm.
then we limit our students greatly. And it's just because our view is so narrow in that way. So that's probably my top thing. Um, my second thing would be that after realizing it's not working, we place the work of the change on the student rather than the teacher.
Hmm.
Because if something's not working, well, I'm a great teacher. I have 25 years of experience. I have students who have placed in the top 10 of RCM exams, whatever. This one is just an anomaly and they need to get it together. And that is, that's such a hard thing because you're noticing that the student's technique and the way they're approaching the instrument is just not what you have typically seen. And
Hmm.
so then we think, okay, I need them to change this. I need them to listen more. I need them to sit still. Instead of
Yes.
pointing the thumbs back this way towards ourselves And instead of saying, well, they're not fitting into my studio or my teaching approach, it is really the other way around.
Absolutely. I work with a lot of young teachers, and that is one of the number one things we work on, of course, with every student. But it's that old Francis Clark adage that telling is not teaching. And too many teachers let themselves off the hook once they've said the thing they're supposed to say. But just because you've said it, or just because it worked for 70% of your students, it doesn't mean something is wrong with the other 30%. There is no one system. I say this all the time on this show. We want a 7-step process to teach students how to play the piano, but it does not exist.
No. If it does, do not buy into it. I'm just going to say it.
Right, right. Anyone who tells you differently, I know it's a lovely promise, but it is not true.
It feels so hopeful. Like, oh, that's beautiful. It's like 7 steps to making sourdough. That's also a lot. It's like 74. But the same thing for teaching. It's just not true. You cannot purchase a perfectly wrapped. And I think a lot of times when teachers start to realize something's not working and they kind of begin to blame the student, they enter what I call the deaf phenomena. And it's, if you know that someone is hard of hearing or has hearing impairments, you start to speak very loudly and you overemphasize and your eyes get very big and you talk very loudly towards them, and you sort of start to remove the intelligence from what you're communicating to them because you think they're capable of understanding what you're saying. We need to realize that we're actually the big thing that can change. I think the third thing I would say is something that you actually talk about a lot, is teachers get stuck because they're used to teaching by a method rather than following pedagogy.
Yeah.
When you're used to the pacing of Faber or Alfred, and that just ain't cutting it, sister, and you are like, oh boy, what do I do now? And then this results in like this frenzy of method purchasing. When teachers buy all the methods, I think you've met teachers like that before too.
Yes.
I have teachers message me all the time, like, what method is good for ADHD students? Like, any of them. What method is good for visually impaired students? Any of them. What method is good? It's because you are the method. And if we rely simply on the pacing or the way technique is introduced in one method, you're going to be stuck when it comes to somebody who learns just a little bit differently.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you and I feel pretty aligned then, Elizabeth. I know I do say this all the time, but if we take a step back and say, oh, I think this one finite static printed resource is going to adapt and change to any live human being in front of me, like,
so disappointed.
You're going to be so disappointed. And it's just not a reliable expectation.
No.
And it's not the method's fault. It's just that that's not the purpose of books that we use. So I always say we're in the driver's seat. Like, we are driving the vehicle, and the book can be the vehicle or something that we look at along the journey, but it is really up to us. So I love that. I know I get that question all the time. Well, what method should I use? For anyone, it's like, whatever uses music you like. To me, that's really the determining factor, because I see methods as books of sequential repertoire. And if it's music that I think my students are going to like, then I'm on board. So I used to teach an adult student who spent a lot of time advocating for individuals with dyslexia. And we used to talk very extensively about her work and legislation she helped write and all kinds of things. And one of the things that I found really fascinating was there are these ways of teaching students to read that obviously do not work for dyslexic students, that make it really hard. But these proven forms of teaching reading that do work for dyslexic students actually still work for neurotypical students as well. And I was always so intrigued by that. Like, it literally keeps me up at night sometimes thinking, like, what do we do in piano teacher world? Because there's a lot that does not work for students with learning exceptionalities, but that actually still works for everyone. And so instead of feeling like we're making exceptions for these students in these diverse populations that surely are tired of feeling like the exception, how can we model our instruction in ways that just works for everyone? And I'm curious if that's something you've experienced, or if you have any thoughts as to any of those implications or how we could do that.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I wish I could say that there was a way to do that. There is and there isn't.
Mm,
Um, so inclusive teaching is the thing that says everyone is welcome here.
mhm.
Adaptive teaching is the thing that says you are welcome and I'm ready for you.
Yeah.
So, having an inclusive studio where you are openly like, hey, if you learn differently, you are welcome here. But
Mhm.
having a studio where you're like, you are not only welcome, but I am prepared for you, or I am willing to learn about you.
Mm,
That to me is one of the most beautiful things. You were talking about loving the puzzle pieces of how people
mhm.
fit together and how they learn. And that's really where this comes into play. And there is one thing that I think is the king above all else, which I'll share in just a second.
Mm,
But I think that desire to truly place your students' humanity at the soul of their lesson experience
mhm.
is really what sets really good teachers apart from just the good ones in
Yeah.
this way. Because you're willing to say, I don't know a lot about OCD and Tourette's, but you know what? I know a lot about piano and I would love to learn how to make this work for you because I want you to experience music. I don't want you to be one of the ones that's left out. You know, that just kind of gives me chills to be that,
Oh,
to do that.
you
And
and
so
me both.
it's just what makes this little piece of what we're talking about so much bigger in the scope of we don't want anybody left out.
Yeah.
But there is one thing
Ooh.
that I think is kind of the crux of teaching that we really don't talk about or hear about very much at all. And I wish more people would get hyped up about it. And that is communication.
Mm,
Because if you break down everything that is in a music lesson, like a one on one, it's instruction, it's
yes.
asking questions, it's giving directions. All of this is accepting and giving communication. That's what
Mhm.
we're doing. That's what we
Right.
do. And so if you can, and if teachers can hone their communication to be experts in
Mhm.
communication as piano teachers, you won't leave anyone out. And what I always think about is some of the kids I work with are so highly gifted in music, but they can't string a sentence together because they
Yes.
have so many processing delays or speech delays. If I just purely went on that, they would never be playing Liszt La Campanella.
Yeah.
Never. But they are. And
Mm,
they're 11 years old and they're amazing. And they learned
yeah.
it by ear because communication is the thing. So I think if teachers can really get excited about saying less, which doesn't sound nearly as fun as I feel like it is. Um, but Scott Price had us do this activity when I was at the University of South Carolina, and we had to choose a piece to teach one of our fellow graduate students, and we would give the directions in sequential order, like, how we would want a student to approach a beginning piece, like
Hmm.
tell them what we're going to do, give them their finger numbers, their hand position, whatever. And then he would say, great, now say that in 10 words.
Mm,
Now
hmm.
say that in 5 words. Now say that in 3 words.
Wow.
The process that forces you to go through mentally is literally just like shoveling out all of this extra stuff that really was so unnecessary. It's like the most aggressive editor of a magazine, like just chipping away your whole article. Like, you're like, I loved those words. They were so pretty. But I love the Oxford commas. Please give my
Oh,
commas.
don't come for my Oxford comma, Elizabeth. I love my Oxford comma.
Exactly. But that's how I feel about
Mhm.
communication. If we can
Yeah.
just, and if teachers can just say what they mean and mean what they say, then it
Yeah.
doesn't matter if you're teaching a student who has autism on the spectrum, who's ADHD. If you just tell me exactly what I need to do, I don't have
Mhm.
to filter through any extra anything or figure out your tone of voice or what
Yeah.
story you're trying to connect this to analogy to music history because somebody fell out of a rocking chair. I'm looking at you, Brahms. You know, it's so much less fun on
Yeah.
that side. But then on the flippity flop, as I like to say with my students, um, you can pick it up on the back end after they're
Yeah.
so comfortable. So that's
Yeah.
probably it's such a hard question to answer because
Mm,
it's so varied. But I really
mhm.
think the whole thing is communication.
Yeah. No, I think it's brilliant. And I think many of us probably felt targeted in that because I love me a long drawn out analogy.
I love a beautiful symbolism and the way the rose blooms in the spray. Like, yep. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
remember telling Dr. Price that like that's kind of painful. He was like, I know.
Yeah, it is. Well, it goes back to when I'm working with these newer teachers, I always say, when you feel like your attention is on you and what you are saying, then your attention is in the wrong place. And we do, especially when we're newer, but even as seasoned teachers, we can kind of fall in love with our own words and we can think, oh, I'm describing this so well, and let me just keep going. And actually, we need to pay attention to our student and what they're experiencing and the cues they're giving us, because we all know we live in a society with ever limiting attention spans, and we do need to learn to speak concisely and directly and all of those things. I took my oldest daughter to have a lesson with Kate Boyd at Butler University a couple weeks ago. And that's what she said when she left her lesson. She was like, she's very direct, and not in a rude way at all. I mean, Kate was so soft with her and very lovely. But I realized, I'm like, yes, you're used to me beating around the bush when really I need to be more direct.
So hard to do. And I think the simplest thing we can think of is, instead of starting with the abstract and ending with the concrete, flip it around.
Yeah.
That's the biggest and easiest swap. It really is. Just start with the exact and then move to the analogy, you know?
Well, we were talking about how we all think we're probably a little neurodiverse, but as a 43-year-old woman here who is quite sure that I am living with undiagnosed ADHD, could we talk a few moments about ADHD, because it's a pretty hot topic in our circles. So I just want to clarify a few things, because once upon a time there was ADD and there was ADHD, and we would diagnose a lot of females, especially with ADD, because they didn't show those hyperactivity tendencies. And that wasn't the issue, right? They can sit still in class. But I believe that ADD is gone as a diagnosis, right? And it's simply ADHD now. Isn't that because all of the hyperactivity is still there, but it's just going on inside our brains instead of coming out of our bodies? Is that a thing, or have I just picked that up along the way somewhere?
Yes. And welcome to the club. I'm also ADHD.
Yay!
ADHD. Welcome. I was diagnosed when I was 3.
Wow.
Yes, very new in the 80s, ADHD.
I'm kind of shocked. That's not very common.
All the Ritalins, all the things. I was like a
wow.
test failure, because I was very, very hyperactive. I'm fine now. Thanks for asking. I'm all good. But I love being ADHD. It's so much fun. But no, it's basically because we realized, and we, science, behavioral scientists, all the smart people, realized that it's more to do with impulsivity, the impulsive things to do with ADHD, and kind of like there are impulsive mental thought patterns, like, oh, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this. And that's where we get that kind of scattered sense. And so they kind of put it under 2 categories. They have attentive, which is where you just struggle to stay focused, and it can manifest in so many different ways. That's more what we would think of as females being diagnosed with that, because it's just like the little bit scattered and we just fail to follow through with things, unfinished projects, unfinished crafts. I have so many unfinished crafts. It's kind of hilarious. At some point, I'm going to pull out all the paint by numbers I have purchased and just like guess which paints go with which. And it's going to be really interesting. I've saved them for this purpose, so I'm going to do it. It's going to be really, really graphic and awful and horrifying.
I can identify with this on so many levels.
So that's your inattentive. And then the other is the hyperactive impulsive, which is not just the impulsive thoughts, but it turns into impulsive actions, physical actions. So you're correct. They did do away with ADD, and it's basically like what they did with Asperger's and autism.
I was going to ask about that too.
Just under the umbrella of autism. And that actually was really upsetting for a lot of people.
Yes.
Very, very upsetting, because it's like, no, I have Asperger's. I do not have autism. Because it's like, no, I identify as this, not as that. The same thing for ADD and ADHD. I know some people who really still say I'm ADD. And that's okay. That's okay. It's basically the same thing. But if that matters to you, then stick with it. So that's kind of what's going on with that. And the research is still kind of evolving.
Of
I think
course.
we'll probably expand it even further,
Mhm.
but that's what the current says.
I appreciate that last philosophy that you just shared, because my husband worked for almost 20 years in an agency that did various services for adults with disabilities. And so we are very cognizant of terminology and words you do not use. And we try really hard to do that well. And so there are a lot of trends in 21st century society of, say this, don't say this. I was curious what your thoughts were about how I know we're not supposed to call someone an autistic person because therefore it defines them. And do you have strong feelings about that one way or another?
I personally don't have strong feelings. This research has changed a lot in the last 2 to 3 years. Prior to that, it was all first person language, like person with dyslexia, person with apraxia, autism. But more and more, we're seeing folks with these disabilities step up and say, hey, I'm autistic and I'm awesome. So if my students want to refer to themselves as autistic, I'm all with it. I kind of use the language interchangeably in the things that I do. And I don't camp out in one camp or another because it's not my choice. I'm not representing those folks in that way. And so if you want to say that you're a person with autism, I'm all for it. If you want to say that you're autistic, I'm all for it. So the current trend is leaning more towards autistic, or I am ADHD, or I am dyslexic. But that doesn't mean that everyone is going to feel that way, which is the beautiful thing about neurodiversity. We have so many different colors and shapes and sizes of beautiful people in the world. And it's just amazing to see everyone's contributions. And I'm cool with whatever they think.
I think that's probably the most mental peace you can have with this. And of course, this has implications all over society for all kinds of terminology we should use or should not use. And I love that point that, this isn't me. Like,
Right.
I can't speak for you.
So it's not up to me. But I do try to be really respectful of whatever is kind of currently. I try to say very current on it, just because I don't want to be outdated or offensive on what is something that's new coming up.
And I always figure, like, if my words cause harm or discomfort for someone, then absolutely I'll change them. And so it's just paying attention and being a good human, I guess, right? I'm really curious if you have any thoughts, because I work with a lot of teachers and there's always questions about, oh, I have this student on the spectrum who does this, or I think this student is ADHD, and what do I do with this? And of course, again, I always direct them to you and your resources. But I'm always torn, because not every teacher needs to teach every student. And so we had this lovely chat just a few minutes ago about staying open to teaching the human in front of you and all of that inclusive teaching and all of those beautiful things. But what advice do you have for teachers who are not sure if they really are equipped to work with a particular student?
This is a really excellent topic. And I think the answer lies in knowing yourself as a teacher and thinking about, it is another human in front of me. Do I feel confident in my communication? Do I feel confident in my teaching enough that I can teach it in a million different ways? Can I teach rhythm a whole bunch of different ways? Can I teach music reading? Can I flip it on its head and teach it in a way that I've never taught it before? And it's not, do you have the confidence to take someone through Faber? No, it's, do you feel good enough about the way you teach to do it in a way that you've never done before? And what we really have to think about as well is, am I a good fit for that student? Not, is the student, can it fit into my perfect, beautiful studio, but am I going to be the one who's going to bring out the musicality in that student? And I think the best teacher is the one that's curious, that's really, really a good problem solver, a teacher that is really invested in the person in front of them. You can have a teacher who doesn't even have a music degree, who's amazing at working with students who learn differently, just because they're innately curious and they're really good problem solvers. So I think that's a really good question to ask. And also a good question to ask yourself is, do I feel equipped to deal with the extra things, not the musical aspects, but the behaviors, the things that I don't understand and don't have experience with, that can
Yeah.
be very intimidating and scary
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with students of varying levels of severity and disabilities for about 20 years. And I still, if I sense when I meet a new student, like, oh, this is not going to be a good fit, I have
Mm-hmm.
absolutely no problem in saying, I'm going to refer you to this music therapist, or I'm going to refer you to this person,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not worth it for me to think, oh, I think I can fix them. No, 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 no. I just want them to be with the best person possible to help bring that musicality to the surface. So I think it's a two-pronged thing of, do you feel confident in your pedagogy? And
Mm-hmm.
do you
Mm-hmm.
feel grounded in your pedagogy? Because if you don't understand something, you can't teach it.
Right. Very true. Very true.
And do you feel good about learning about all these extra things?
And I think those things change season to season, right? Like I think so much of it is just taking assessment over our own personal bandwidth, like what we have to offer at this moment. I know, like when my children were really small, I didn't take any preschool aged students because I just didn't have any more little people energy in me. And now that I'm out of that phase, I'll bring a few back on because I love them. But there are just seasons for me as a teacher where I'm not going to be able to show up for the students in that way. And
Absolutely.
I'm kind of on a rampage these days about changing the way we look at what a full-time studio is. I really think there are these disproportionate expectations out there about sizes of studios, and I used to think larger the better. But if you're a teacher who's trying to teach 50, 60 students a week, you are not going to have mental bandwidth to deal with a lot of neurodiverse students. Would you agree?
Oh, 100%. I keep
Yeah.
a very small studio,
Mm-hmm.
preferably 15 or under. And
Wow.
I was just having a conversation with one of my really good friends who's an incredible piano teacher.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I just feel so tired after this year. And we were
Yeah.
sort of just sharing the sorts of students we've had over the past year. And I've had some very challenging students. My students also tend to take quite long lessons.
Mm-hmm.
And so what looks like a full studio for somebody else is way
Yeah.
too full for me.
Yeah.
And so I was just encouraging a teacher the other day, like, think about the mental load of the kids you're putting on all the same day of your schedule for
Yes.
the fall. And it's just amazing how teaching kids who learn differently, teaching kids who are on the autism spectrum with dyslexia, it takes so much mental work to be
Mm-hmm.
so overly prepared for them. Even with the communication thing, just having all of your ducks in a row, like very in a row,
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of work. It's a heavy mental load.
It is. And even with quote neurotypical students, like I always say, it sounds like I had a 6-hour teaching day the other day, and it's like
Oh,
to the outside world, they're like 6 hours, that's nothing. But it's not, because there is never a mental break, right? You are fully on and fully present and thinking 16 steps ahead of the game
and
and
you're having to
engaging.
switch every 30, 45, 60 minutes
Absolutely,
to a
that
new
too.
student, new approach, new communication techniques, new everything.
Absolutely. And if this is the kind of teacher we aspire to be, which it is for me, again, it's all about the person that walks in the room and connecting with them and seeing
Yeah,
what we can pull out of them, then it is. And then you throw on heavy things like tics and, different
it is so much.
pedagogical styles. It's a lot.
Well,
It's a
and just
lot.
realizing that, for me, one of the
Mhm.
main things is just being there constant,
Mhm.
because that's something that
Yeah.
they rely on, routine. So
Yes.
no matter how you act in piano, I'm always going to be the same person each week. And so
Mhm.
even just keeping that level of same calmness can be very tiring. So all of that really
Yeah.
matters. And to just
Yeah.
thinking through, am I a good fit for this student? And there is no
Yeah.
shame ever in saying no. And there's also no
Mhm.
shame in trying it and then
Yeah.
being like, you know what? I have loved working with you, but I don't think I can take you where you're capable of going.
Yeah.
Like, no shame.
And that goes to communication with the family, right?
Yes.
And that's another thing that teachers shy away from is some of us don't love having hard conversations with families or admitting that maybe we are equipped for this and maybe we're not. So even just being able to say, let's try it for 6 weeks and see what happens.
Yes.
And I'm not sure if I'm the right fit. I've definitely gone through series of my life where have felt this pressure to project an air of competency all the time. So I wouldn't have wanted to admit that I'm not sure if I know how to handle this student, but I'll give it a try. It's okay. And I think we all need to be more willing to be
Yeah.
vulnerable in that way as well.
It's hard. And our
Mhm.
students, the kids who are coming to us, the neurodivergent kids, are very vulnerable themselves.
Yeah,
Even their families are vulnerable in saying, even if they don't communicate their diagnosis to you, in
yes.
trying this activity and trying something that's typically built for kids who are
Mhm.
the ideal that we talked about, when their child is not the ideal, it's like,
Yeah,
okay, they're probably not going to be a fit for this either. I've had
right.
so many parents say, I understand they don't fit in soccer, they don't fit in gymnastics. So if they don't fit
Oh,
in piano too, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, come here.
I know.
Um,
I
so
know.
knowing that they're being so vulnerable, that's such a
Yeah,
hard thing for parents,
yeah.
even just to let their child try something that everybody else is good at and to not
Hmm.
see them succeed. It just makes me
Yeah,
it's incredibly brave of them.
right.
So, the least we can do is say, hey, to the parent, will you sit in on our lesson and tell me what to do?
Yeah,
I've done that so many times. Like, hey, we've got some behaviors going on that I can't quite figure out. Will you just sit in the lesson with me and teach me?
yeah.
Because I can do the music part, but I'm not quite sure how to handle this part. And I don't want to be a hindrance. And I don't
Mm.
want to be the reason your child doesn't do well at this. Like
Wow.
the look on parents' faces, like tears, because like, yes, yes, yes. Like never no, always yes, always.
See, and we have this expectation that parents are just going to assume that we have it all figured out. But I
Come
bet
on.
parents in
No,
those situations have not experienced enough people being vulnerable with them in the same
right.
way, right? And so,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. It's a two-way street.
for sure. For sure. Well, speaking of parents, I do have a lot of questions about how we handle parents who maybe haven't disclosed a diagnosis, or maybe parents don't seem to be aware of a diagnosis that we're seeing. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about in our secret Patreon conversations. So I'm going to wrap us up for the podcast here now, but I hope everyone will hop over to the Patreon and check out the inner conversation over there. But before we go, can you tell everyone where we can find out more about you and what you're up to these days?
So you can always find me hanging out on Instagram or Facebook,
Yep.
Creative Piano Pedagogy.
Hmm.
That's my podcast as well. That's
Hmm.
something new that I'm up to. I started it back in, I think, February or March,
Hmm.
and it's going super well, and I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah.
Starting some new YouTube tutorials over the summer with
Wow. Hmm.
really cool repertoire things and how to teach supplemental repertoire to kids by rote. Uh,
Nice.
you know, Standard classical rep that's typically taught with music, how to teach it by rote for kids
Mm.
with visual impairments and things like that. So come join the fun.
Wow, that is a really needed niche. So that's exciting. So here's my funny question for you. I need you to tell me something that you love beyond measure, Elizabeth. Give me the lowdown.
Okay, beyond measure is the cloudiest day that you can possibly imagine, with like
Oh,
the big fat black looming clouds and a
yes.
chai tea.
And a chai tea.
And that's
Mm.
just like my perfect, if I have a cloudy day and a
Hmm.
chai tea, all is right with the world.
I love
And
that.
it's actually a joke amongst my friends and my family because I'm just like, they'll be like, hey, how are you doing? I'm like, it's a cloudy day. It's so nice. And I'm not an ER personality at all. Like, I'm very calm and positive, but I'm just like, oh, it's a cloudy day. It's so nice. I just love it so much. Like, I can't express how much it just fills my soul. And I read this quote not long ago because cloudy days feel like the world is quiet. So I don't know if
Oh.
to be some inner connection with that. But I just beyond measure love cloudy day with a chai tea and just all is right with the world.
I think I'm having like a real reaction to you saying this, and it's so interesting because I'm a sunshine girl. I like the sun, but it's also like, to me, as you're talking, it just feels like the cloudy day represents like lowered expectations. And like, it's just okay just to be. I don't know. As you're talking, I'm like, oh, maybe I like cloudy days too.
Exactly. I don't have to go outside and do my yard work. I'm just kind of inside and this is hilarious beyond measure. I love when it's cloudy and I open up all of my blinds.
So you can see the cloudiness.
I am that person. My blinds are closed on a sunny day. I'm like, seriously, it's so bright out there. But if it's a cloudy day, I will open up the double doors. I will literally open the windows just to feel the cloudiness. It's just so invigorating.
I love this. This is one of my favorite answers to this question.
The weirdest answer you've had in a while, that somebody opens up their blinds to just feel the heavy cloud. But it's just so calming and I can't explain it.
I love that. I think it's a top-notch answer. So you probably know around here I like to close out with a little toast to the profession, and I would love to throw that ball in your court today if you don't mind. So,
oh my goodness. Well, in your classic style, I would say cheers to teaching at the pace of our students' learning. And may we not be afraid to teach differently than we learn.
Hear, hear. That's great. May we not be afraid to teach differently than we learn. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for being here today. And we have just thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been such a great time.
All right, friends, here is the deal. There are almost 40 more minutes of this conversation waiting for you in the Super Friends community on Patreon. Specifically, Elizabeth and I talk about diagnoses, why they're hard to get, what to do when you suspect one, and whether or not they even matter at all. We also have a great conversation on pathological demand avoidance, which explains so much about the way some of our students respond to our requests. You get access to that conversation along with so many more when you sign up for the Super Friends community on Patreon. Membership is currently just $3 or $6, depending on how much you want access to. It's your way of supporting me so I can keep bringing you this work. Head to ChristinaWhitlock.com/community for more information, or check that link in the show notes. That's all for now, my friends. Onward and upward as we embrace our students for the uniquely fascinating puzzles they are.